It's been 30 days since I picked up this. This is the Google Pixel Fold. It's my first foldable, and I thought it'd be interesting to look at what it's been like to live with a foldable for the first time. Some of the points aren't specific to this phone, and some of them are, and they're in no particular order. So here they are. On the Pixel Fold, and certainly on most of the recent devices, the outside screen can be used 100% of the time. You never have to unfold it if you don't want to. I would say that it's probably a waste of time you having a foldable if you're not going to unfold it, but I don't think you have to worry about whether or not the outside screen is actually going to be practical to use. It's basically like having a regular smartphone, and on the occasion when you want to, you can make that into a tablet. When it comes to the inner screen, it doesn't make sense in a lot of situations, and that's generally because a lot of apps aren't actually built to take advantage of that extra screen real estate like they would be on a tablet. So I still think there's work to be done on optimizing a lot of the apps to work properly on a larger screen. Even some of the Google apps don't quite manage it. It is true what they say about the fold on the inner screen. You'd sort of stop noticing it to a point. That said, you do notice it when you run your finger over it, and if you lay this thing down and the light hits it properly, man, the screen is all over the place. It's got bumps and lumps all over it. So I think when you see reviewers say you won't notice the fold, I think that's a little bit of a lie. You do notice it. You get used to it, but when you see it from certain angles, this thing is all over the place. And I don't think that is specific to this phone, it's specific to all foldables that I've seen. Foldables, and this one in particular, are significantly heavier and bulkier than most regular phones. I personally came from the iPhone 12 mini, so it's possibly not a fair comparison because, I mean, you know, they're quite significantly different in size, thickness, and weight. But yeah, I can tell you, I have definitely noticed the size of this thing when I'm using it one-handed or carrying it around in my pocket. I suspect that newer models, like the Pixel Fold 10 and the Galaxy Fold 7 and the Huawei Mate Half, I don't know what it's called, are going to be significantly thinner because they're much newer devices. This is a chonky boy though. Having a larger screen in your pocket at a moment's notice is super nice for content consumption. In particular, for this generation of Fold, it's super nice because it's got more of a landscape aspect ratio when you open it out. So you don't get huge black bars at the top and bottom. On something like the Galaxy Fold 7, that is much slimmer in profile, so when you open it out, you aren't going to get that sort of like landscape ratio. You've got to flip it and then you're still going to get black bars. And basically, from what I can gather on some of those devices, it kind of makes as much sense to use it on the front screen as it does to open it. But on this, you definitely get a bigger screen when you open it and watch videos. Yes, you're still going to get some bars top and bottom than you do if you watch it on the outer screen. Which is still a big screen, don't get me wrong, but you know, you've got that, or you've got that. That is definitely a bigger video than that one. So I think it's a shame for this device in particular that they didn't stick with this more kind of passport shape. I mean, it's basically the same size as one of these Field Notes notebooks. So it's super similar in size to a Field Notes, or in fact a a new 3DS, but not the XL, the regular one. So it's almost identical in size. If you want to know how big one of these is, and you've got one of these, walk around with this in your pocket for a few days. The battery life on this is way better than I expected. Now again, I'm coming from this 5-year-old reduced capacity iPhone 12 mini, so I suspect any device would have a far better battery capacity than this. But you know, I use the inner screen a fair bit on this. It's a big phone, it's got a bright screen on the outside and the inside. I kind of expected that the battery was going to run out way quicker than it really does. In fact, I'm not even charging this every day at the moment. Again, it's brand new, so that will change over time. But I kind of expected if you keep opening it and using the big screen that it would run down much quicker. But in my personal use, it's lasted much longer than I expected. Case options for this particular phone are very limited, and I suspect that's probably the case for many of the folding models. There's loads of cases available, don't get me wrong, but I mean in terms of the different styles of cases that you can get. Generally speaking, I have had one of these leather slip cases for all of the iPhones I've had for the last like 10 years. Always the same brand. They are Senna cases, which I am sad to have found out the other week they actually went out of business, so you couldn't have got this for the current iPhones anyway. I did manage to pick up a slip case. The quality's not the same. I couldn't get a leather one. It doesn't come with the inbuilt card pocket, which is really what I wanted for this. But generally speaking, obviously a folding phone is more difficult to put a case on. This particular case is the official Google one, which is kind of silicone on the back, but plastic on the front. So I don't know if you'll be able to tell here. It's actually two different colors slightly and two different textures in the hand. So it's grippy on the back because it's silicone, but if you put it down face down on a table or something, it's kind of slides around because this part is plastic. The other thing to mention is that most of these cases rely on some form of adhesive to actually keep them on the device. This bit would pop off if it wasn't glued here, along here, and the back part has also got glue here and here, on the inside obviously. So I'm not super keen on these kind of permanently on phones. I tend to use cases like this where they slide out and then I'm using the phone essentially naked because it's smaller in the hand, it's more comfortable, and I appreciate the original design of the device rather than, you know, you spend all this money on a device and then you slap a case on it that's kind of plasticky or rubbery. Not my typical. This has got a skin on it, I should say, but for probably 4 out of the 5 years I owned it, it was completely naked when I used it. So I'm still experimenting with the best way to carry this. I'm not particularly in love with the fact that these kind of cases adds bulk to the device when it's in your hand. So if anybody's got any suggestions, I do of course recognize that this phone is no longer produced anymore, so case supplies may be dwindling, but I'd kind of really like something very similar to this slip-in ultra slim leather case with a card pocket, because I'm now having to carry a separate wallet and I haven't done that for probably 15 years. So essentially I keep forgetting to take it. It's also worth noting that generally speaking iPhones will always have more options for cases than other brands, so it is what it is. It is true what they say, when you open a Fold, generally speaking, they don't open 100% flat. You do have to do this kind of counterintuitive force it flat kind of maneuver, which feels, it doesn't feel like it's going to break, but it doesn't feel like it's going to help it not break. Although that said, I'm not always convinced that it needs to be 100% flat. I quite like using it like a book sometimes, especially if you're split screening or on apps where it's kind of already designed to run across two screens. It kind of makes sense that your scroll bar runs down the middle of the screen. The operating system could do a far better job of utilizing the inner screen. So not only in apps, like I mentioned before, but in terms of your overall layout. So it would be nice to have a layout when you're in the single screen mode, and then when you open it to have a completely different layout on the inner screen. For example, a different wallpaper, or maybe these widgets aren't on the screen when it's open, but they are when it's shut, because you might want to do different types of tasks on the inner screen versus the outer screen. So I think the OS has still got a way to go in terms of utilizing the difference between the two screens, because generally speaking, I treat my iPad differently than I treat my iPhone when I was running them side by side, and I wouldn't have had the same background and app arrangement on my iPad as I did my iPhone. So I sort of don't want to do it on this either. Something that I've never seen people mention about foldables, and I don't know if it's specific to this one or they all do it, but they are super satisfying to close. This particular one has a magnet, so when you get it to a point, it shuts. I mean, there's no better feeling than that. Listen to that. In fact, listen to that. Yeah, super satisfying. I mean, it doesn't do anything other than just feel really satisfying. It's a bit of a fidget to just close it, open it, close it. I know these phones are rated for a certain number of folds, so I'm probably wasting some of those by opening and closing it, but like I say, it's super satisfying. One thing that's underrated about foldables is using the outside screen whilst the device is partially unfolded. So like this basically. So what I have done a number of times is, for example, play a YouTube video on the outside screen like so, and then propped it up on a table. So it's got a built-in stand, and then you can watch the device on the outside screen. This is a super underrated feature. You can also do it in like a tent style. I've actually used this whilst traveling on an aircraft on the tray table, just propped it up, used it like a stand. I actually think that's super underrated as a feature of foldables. Nobody really seems to talk about it in the videos that I've watched. It doesn't feel anywhere near as delicate as I thought it would. I mean, I haven't dropped it yet, and I suspect it wouldn't be a good idea to drop it while it's open without a case, for example. Might be a bad idea, but it feels pretty substantial and not anywhere near as delicate as I thought it would do. So I'm kind of surprised about that. I sort of default to, when I'm folding it, by pushing on the bezels, which on this particular device are reasonably thick compared to the newer devices. So I'm not sort of opening and closing it by pushing in the center of the screen. I tend to do it here on the bottom. Apart from anything else, that is basically where my thumb's going to be. But yeah, it doesn't feel super fragile. I think people's fears about how fragile they are probably a bit over the top. That said, I wouldn't kind of chuck it around in the sand. But so far, I think it's felt pretty durable. Some apps make way more sense on the bigger screen than they do on a regular screen. One in particular is email. Whereas on a normal phone, you're going to be either in your list of mails or you're going to be in the email itself. On this, you can do both, so it's much more like a desktop or tablet experience, which is super nice when you're going through a bunch of emails at once. Those are my initial thoughts on foldables. I still think it's a pretty interesting category, and I'm kind of enjoying the device overall. I sort of wish that it was smaller and lighter, but I guess, you know, I'm always comparing to something that evidently doesn't seem like it's ever going to come to light again. So if you're going to have a big phone, why not go really big, was my theory. So I don't know, I'm still kind of into it. I think it's definitely changed the way I use my phone. Arguably not for the better, because I was trying to use my phone less, so I have definitely picked up in terms of screen time on this device. But then I probably reduced screen time on my iPad, so swings and roundabouts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you interested in foldables? Have you tried a foldable? Do you think that they are just a gimmick that's never going to fully take off? Or do you think eventually we're all going to have some sort of folding device because it will just make way more sense? Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.